You are headed down the interstate. Things are going very, very well. You set the cruise control on about 75, 76, however fast you think you can go and still not get a ticket. And even when you see the highway patrolman, you still automatically put the brake on, even if you're just doing 63, because it just scares you. But anyway, on this day, things are going just as well as they can. You're making great time. You're going to get to your destination early. You got time to stop by at Starbucks or something or another. And then you either top the crest of a hill or you go around a curve, and there you see before you a sea of brake lights. And the brake lights go on and on. It seems as if they go on forever. And as you top this hill and you see all the brake lights, a cuss word slips out of your lips, or if it doesn't slip out of your lips, then you think it, and then if you're not thinking it, then you're probably not really a real person, because you see that, and my favorite cuss words, phooey, phooey, I can't believe this, or darn, when I really get mad, that's what I say. And you see all these brake lights, and you know that and then what happens is you start making those decisions. Do I stay in this lane? Do I stay in this lane? Do I go back and forth? Which lane's going to go the fastest? And then, of course, the ultimate decision, how long do you stay in the lane that's going to end? This is a crucial decision. They should teach you this when they're giving you driver's ed. Do you stay in that left-hand lane all the way to the end? Do you zip around that person who's not going fast enough, and then you go all the way to the end, and then you just kind of put your car right there at that end, and you're just begging somebody to let you in, or you get kind of aggressive and you go up there? Or are you a Christian, and do you go on over, when you're supposed to? Or do you just go all the way down and then you sit there and you wonder how long it's going to be, and there's this construction, and then you get there and there's four guys around one shovel, and they're just talking, and again, you have a Christian decision. Do you give them the dirty look that you really want to give them? You have ruined my life. Or do you just kind of let it go? And these traffic jams that occur because of construction, they're so, it's unexpected. I know there's an app for it, but I don't pay any attention to that. And they're so irritating. It's so frustrating. It is so much like life. There are multiple road trips that we find scattered throughout Scripture. I guess the first is when Adam and Eve are invited on an involuntary road trip. You got to leave the garden. But probably, the ultimate road trip, well, that's Abraham. Abraham leaves Ur the Chaldees, whatever that is, and he leaves Ur the Chaldees, and he crosses the Sinai Peninsula going over to the land of Canaan. Or you have Moses, who goes down to Egypt, and he takes the people out of Egypt and leading them toward the promised land, but they don't get there. That remains for Joshua to do. Or if you look in the New Testament, the book of Luke is arranged like a road trip. They're always going, they're always headed someplace, and someplace is Jerusalem. There are aspects of road trips that are just delightful. You make memories, you have fun. Hey, you remember the time? My son and I went scuba diving on the fall break last week. And if I win that $242 million on Mega Millions tonight, I'm going scuba diving every month. It is so expensive, but it is so much fun. And it was just perfect weekend. And so we'd finished scuba diving, and we decided to go where we were, Key Largo, to go down to Key West. And so we had a little road trip. In fact, Matthew said that when he got in the car, road trip. And so we took the two-lane highway down to Key West, and we went to that spot that's the southernmost part of Key West. And we didn't see Hemingway's house. We did get to see Truman's summer White House. And I don't know if you're aware of this, and I kind of was, but Key West bears certain similarities to New Orleans in that you can see things in Key West that you probably are not going to see in Green Hills. And we saw and because I'm in chapel, I'm not going to give you details, but we saw a couple of things in Key West that I'm sure, Matthew and I 30 years from now, Dad, you remember that time we ate at Key West and that girl that walked by? Yes, son, your mom's here. Let's talk about that later, because we made some memories and prayed for forgiveness on the way back, and we've scheduled another trip for November to. Yikes! Except they were old people, which is ugh. So. Sorry, that wasn't in the notes. And one involuntary road trip that's found in Scripture is when the people of Israel are taken away into captivity. The first batch goes off to Assyria, the second batch goes off to Babylon. And a prophet named Jeremiah does a lot of talking to these people who've been taken away into Babylon. And Jeremiah is the ultimate downer. He's called the weeping prophet. I mean, the guy's just depressed with a capital D. I mean, he really is. And so it's remarkable that in the middle of his depressing book, you have this it just takes your breath away pretty verse. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Oh, that's good. Then you'll call on me and come and pray to me and I'll listen to you. I know the plans that I have for you. And you can read Jeremiah, that's a 29:11. You can read that verse and you can almost think that it's saying, you know what, God has plans for you and it's always going to work out. Don't worry about it. It is always going to work out. You may not even know where Jeremiah is in the Bible, and yet you know that there's something about at least that reading of that verse that doesn't sound true, because does that describe your life? Does everything always work out? I mean, you may believe just as firmly as Jeremiah says it that God has plans for you, but things don't always work out the way I want them to work out. There are multiple construction zones in my life and yours. And that's what the cool thing is about this passage, is Jeremiah is absolutely aware of that. He's not blowing smoke. He's not some super optimist trying to make a bad situation appear to be good when it isn't. No, he tells the truth. So back in verse 4 of that same 29th chapter, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those that I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Here's what he tells them to do. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters, and find wives for your sons, and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, don't decrease. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I've carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Yes, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. They're prophesying lies to you in my name. I've not sent them, declares the Lord. This is what the Lord says. Listen. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my gracious promise to bring you back to this place, for I know the plans I have for you. Well, that's not nearly as much fun. I would rather just read verse 11. I don't want to read 4 through 10, because 4 through 10, he says, look, I know what y'all are doing. I know what you're telling your preachers. You're telling your preachers to proclaim a message of optimism. You think you're going to get to go back home next week, or maybe the week after that, or maybe the week after that. And so you're not getting married and you're not having children because you're putting your life on hold until happy days come again. Well, listen to me. Stop it. You are living in a land which is a land of unreality. The truth is, you've got 70 more years. So you might as well buck up and make do. You might as well get married, and you need to have kids. And on top of that, you need to plant a garden. Ooh, that sounds really exciting. You need to plant a garden. And let me tell you something else. You need to quit acting a big old whiny baby and acting like a victim. You need to start praying for the city where you live, because if the city prospers, then you prosper. You're not going home anytime soon, so you just need to make do. Well, this so sounds like something your mama would tell you the last time you were throwing a little pity party. I mean, some of you have, like really nurturing moms and think you're the best thing ever. And then some of you have a mom who's a little closer to reality, and they know that you can be a stinker when you want to be. And they say things like, well, you just need to buck up, which is kind of the family crest at our house. You just need to buck up. You know what? You just need to make do. That's what Jeremiah's telling them. You need to make do. Do you have that friend who's super optimistic? Like they're always cheerful. I mean, like always cheerful. And they're the glass that's half full, it's never half empty, and they always see the bright side of things. I mean, sometimes, do you want to put your hands around their neck and just choke them until they're dead? I mean, I know that's not a real spiritual thought, but I mean, sometimes you want to do that, don't you? Or maybe not even like choke them, just slap them once. That would just feel so good. Stop this optimism. They say things like, when life gives you a lemon, just make lemonade. Really? You're going to tell me that, make lemonade? I'm going to hurt you. And that's kind of what our guy Jeremiah is saying. Look, you're someplace you don't want to be. Get used to it. Because you're not going home for a long time. And the fact of the matter is, some of you are going to live and you're going to die in Babylon. Now, the next time you find yourself in, our metaphor today is a construction zone. The next time you find yourself in one of these places that you don't really want to be, it's a place of frustration and irritation and things aren't going well, at least one piece of advice in addition to quit whining and buck up and make do, or whatever phrase you want to use. In addition to that, you might also think about, okay, how much responsibility do I bear for being here? Jeremiah also says the heart's deceitful, which means we lie to ourselves. Oh my goodness, we lie to ourselves all the time. And we get a poor grade. And it's because the teacher, he didn't tell us that it was going to be from that part of the book. Forget the fact that you partied till 3 a.m. and you didn't study. No, it's the teacher. And it's amazing how often that we can do that. We can deceive ourselves. The people of Israel were in Babylon, not because God was mean, but because God was good, and he knew that they needed to be in a place of construction for a while to get their priorities right. A key component of emotional intelligence is when people can acknowledge, this is my fault. And I tell you, I've seen 70-year-olds who only had a thimble full of it. Honest to goodness, you'd think as people would get older, they could come to the realization and they could say, it's my fault. And I've seen grandparents who still can't do that. It's always somebody else's fault. No. The next time you find yourself in one of these places, at least take a couple of moments and look inside. Am I bearing? Do I need to take a long look here? Now, sometimes you can do that, and you will find out that no, not really. It just is. Every time something inconvenient or unnice happens to you, it doesn't mean that God's out to punish you, to teach you a lesson. No, it could just be that means you're a human being. Here's an example. I have a friend of mine who is a missionary down in Guatemala, a 31-year-old single girl. works with, she's a speech therapist, used to work with the school system, decided she wanted to go to Central America. She works with a little school on the top of a volcano just outside the capital city of Guatemala, works with impoverished children, especially works with the Indian, the Mayan children who are looked down upon by the other races down there. A lot of superstitions. She works with children who are deaf. She works with their moms, works in the midst of poverty, a lot of abuse, a lot of sexual abuse. She's doing Jesus work. She sends him an email the other day, and she has some special physical limitations. She's got to come back to the state twice a year. So she's scheduled to come back in December. She sends an email the other day and says, I've got to come back November 4th. I've got gallstones. Probably have to have surgery. And I must admit, I'm a preacher. I know how this works. I'm supposed to know how this works, but I promise you, I read that and I thought, that is just wrong. Really? I don't know that I just flat out accuse the Lord, but I was thinking, really? Could you not pick somebody else to have gallstones? She's serving the least in Guatemala. She's putting her life on hold so that her life can be filled, and now she's got to deal with something like this. Could you not at least waited till December, or maybe pick somebody else on the big gallstone list of life or something? Why? Well, maybe. Maybe there's this hotshot Christian resident who's only going to be at the hospital in Murfreesboro in the month of November. And so she's got to get back from Guatemala to Murfreesboro in November so they can meet in the operating room and fall in love and marry 6 weeks later, and then have 7 children who all become missionaries, and then they serve in third world countries for the remainder of their lives. Maybe that's God's plan for her. I doubt it. It could be. It could be. People write books about that kind of stuff all the time, but it's just not fair. But it is life. We wind up in these construction zones. And the part about it that maybe we hate the most is you don't have any control. No control. Now, when you get in one of these, the people, the control freaks, they're the ones that are going crazy. They're the ones that are changing lanes back and forth. They're the yahoo that gets on the shoulder on the right-hand side, and drives down. And any of you ever been tempted? Like when somebody's driving you down the shoulder, and it's the thought of having a gun in your hand, I'm just talking a tire. I'm not talking about shooting them, just a tire. Okay, so you thought it too. You see the rule breaker driving by, and the do-right in you just wants to, so the control freaks, they're thinking, I can control how quickly I get through this traffic jam, and all they're doing is engaging in disbelief, and you find yourself in that place and you got no control. Your parents tell you they're divorcing, and there's not one blessed thing you can do. The doc says you're sick, and you're really sick, and we got, and you can read all the books and self-help books and all that, but, other than taking your medicine and drinking lots of water, what kind of control? You don't have any control. We go through our lives thinking we're running things. And then we run into these construction zones and it's a screeching halt, and we figure out we didn't control much of anything. And Jeremiah speaks to that as well. After he says, I know the plans. Then he says, you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you. Jeremiah says, got 70 years, but hey, got great plans for you after 70. You seek me, and I will not play hide and seek from you. Jeremiah recommends faithfulness. Don't you know the day they started packing up and leaving for home, 70 years in the future, don't you know they had some kind of mega blowout worship service? Everybody was fired up, and if they used our kind of language, they would talk about how they would feel God's blessing, and it would just be this spiritual high. And well, what about the 70 years prior to that, where you're just planting a garden and trying to pray for this city that you don't want to live in to start with? Faithfulness. Faithfulness is what is called for on those 70 years of construction zones, and faithfulness on those bright, sparkling days that come along every now and then. Just be faithful. For some reason, I think just reading this text, I thought of a friend of mine from years ago that I guess I hadn't thought about in a couple of years. Martha went to church where I did, where I graduated high school. At the time, she was probably late 50s. She was all of like 4'11", and she was one of these really happy people all the time, except you like being around Martha. Oh, she had this distinctive laugh. Oh my goodness, I close my eyes, I can hear her laughing right now. Kind of a cackle, high-pitched. She went to camp with us, and I remember the kids just covering her with shaving cream, big time. And she was just out there in the middle of it, the biggest kid there. I went off to Lipscomb, came back home, started to work there at that church, at Martha's church. And I got to visit with her a lot because in her 60s, she got cancer. And I can remember seeing her in that little turban thing that the ladies wear when they lose their hair, multiple visits with her. Martha did not have a pleasant life. Her husband was an alcoholic. And I don't know that he really stopped drinking until after his wife died of cancer in her 60s. And he wasn't really a mean alcoholic, but it meant he didn't make much money. And when they got money, he blew it. And she was responsible for taking her kids to church, and she was responsible for providing for her family. And she stuck with this fella who was drinking up all their savings. And it just, I mean, even now, pushing 35 years later, it just strikes me as so dadgum unfair. But to know Martha was to see the face of Jesus. Her spirit and her desire to please the Lord, and the way that she served other people and teaching second grade Sunday school for 30 plus years, and her spirit and her absolute refusal to play the victim. Martha Hatfield was no victim. To see her faithfulness in what, at least to this young preacher, seemed to be a lifelong construction zone. And lo and behold, if at the end, what the old depressed prophet said wasn't true. Martha, I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. God help us to live lives of faithfulness, even in the construction zones of life. And we do that because, among other reasons, the words we sing right now are true words. Worthy is the Lamb that was slain.